Yeah,
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for doing this.
It's my pleasure.
And I was just telling, I mean, Tom was here, and I was telling him that Ken's been so humble, saying that my story is not so special. I said it's going to take a few episodes. It can't happen in one. So it's not going to be. There's no rushed up thing. We're going to continue this. It's not going to happen in one. But let me just take you meet everyone. So we have Andrew here. Andrew's in the UK. He's a QC there. We have Joya on that side. She's sitting in Lebanon. She's doing very good work. And I was talking about it before you came in about the fact that she's doing a lot of activism and advocacy, but in a very objective manner. Joya, why don't you unmute and tell him about it? Ken would love to hear about what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Vikram. I'm so happy to be here and attending my very first meeting with you. I'm very honored when you say I'm doing a lot of activism and advocacy. We're trying to do our best here. Objectively, I think we're trying to cover all bases and all needs that we are currently facing, whether it was in the October Revolution, the Lebanese Revolution. We helped a lot for legal awareness campaigns and for advocacy on the street with the protesters. Right now, because we have a financial collapse in Lebanon, we're helping with food donation campaigns, with shelters for the people whose houses exploded in the Beirut explosion on the 4th of August. And besides that, I constantly do activism and advocacy on my online platforms because I feel this has a lot of outreach and serves so many causes at once with very little effort.
Joya, that's a whole presentation. That's a whole presentation. You were just supposed to introduce us, and we'll talk about it on a different level because.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's.
Yeah, you just have to be started off. Is it? Once you start off, it's like a presentation automatic mode.
It's automatic response.
I know. Yeah. I can see that. Again, Tom is here. Tom, obviously, you know Tom.
Yeah, I thought I heard your voice coming down.
Hi,
Lisa, I'm sure you know Lisa.
Yes, how's everybody?
He sort of does.
Ekta sitting in Hyderabad, in India.
Hi again.
MC sitting in California. She's an appellate lawyer there. And Kathleen is sitting in Texas in good sun. She's enjoying herself and she's rubbing it in with people.
Mm-hmm.
And Indrani is in South Africa, but I think I don't know whether she's there right now, but she's there.
Andrew's in
How
London.
about Tanya?
Hi, Tom.
Andrew.
Nice to see you again.
Hello, Happy New Year. I'm connecting through another computer. My name is Natasha Apostolidi. I'm from Greece. It's almost snowing here. It's very cold today. Hello. ODR International, you gave a very remarkable speech. You remember? I was there participating. So I'm very happy to see you all and Happy New Year to all of us. I wish a peaceful and mediating New Year. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha.
But the thing is, again, actually, I told everyone that they should be here by 15 minutes earlier. It seems that doesn't work. It doesn't work. Everyone starts coming in right now. So anyway, this is just we're going to be, it's just a conversation. It's no such formal presentation. I'm sure you're not looking at that. But
we're on India time, Vikram.
Yes. all of you. No, you're not. But let me just tell you, the whole idea, Ken, was behind this Mediators Collective. The idea is to be able to, obviously, people put mediators on one platform, but this is not really only a platform for discussions on mediation in general. The idea is to actually do work, get work for people, referrals, co-mediations, because mediators, I speak to people all over the world, work is a problem. They're not getting enough work. So the whole idea is to create work for them so that all those 10 points that you have listed out, those 10 points they can start working on. Once the stomach is full, at least a lot of activities can happen. So let's also look at that part. And I don't know if all of you have gone through those 10 points that Ken has put out. If you're not, I'll post it separately. It's on, I think, Ken, do you have it on your website?
Would you like me to, are you going to upload them, Vikram?
Oh, yeah, I'll do that. I'll send it out to them. I mean, because the thing is,
Great.
this will come up in later in our discussion, and according to me, it won't happen. It should not finish today. This discussion should continue because I want to get to that much later. We want to actually get to Ken Cloke in 1941. That is where we have to start, and hopefully we'll take 2-3 episodes to reach the 10 points. So Ken, what was it like? I mean, in 1941, what was it like in the 1940s?
Well, that was the year, of course, that I was born. I turn 80 in a couple of months. My parents knew much more about what was going on, of course, than I did. Just by way of background, I imagine my mother is Jewish, from a German Jewish family that came to the United States many years earlier, but parts of which, of course, continued to live in Germany and were eliminated during the Holocaust. My father came from a very kind of waspish background. His father had gone to West Point and been a commanding officer. He had fought in Cuba on behalf of Teddy Roosevelt, and was a colonel in the United States military. My father, of course, rebelled against that. He grew up in the 1930s and went to Spain during the Spanish Civil War and fought on the international brigades against Franco. Both my parents were very active in left-wing causes during the 1930s. They went to Berkeley, which I then went to subsequently. And I was born, of course, just before World War II began in the United States, but after it had already begun in other countries. So, yes, go ahead.
No. I'm just thinking that at that point of time, at that age, what is happening around the world, all those things, what is the impact, what happens?
What's happening around the world is that Germany has already invaded Czechoslovakia, Poland. The war has really begun in earnest. I think that's the predominant fact of that year. There was also, of course, in the United States and around the world, a Great Depression. People were out of work. But as a result of the war effort, and particularly Lend-Lease and that arrangement with England, factories were beginning to get set up again, funded by the US government with Keynesian deficit spending.
I'm sorry. But how did it, translate in terms of the household, the atmosphere around you? Because one is what you read or hear generally, the Great Depression or the World War. But actually, when you're living there, you're part of things. How does it impact the household and the atmosphere around you?
Well, the way that it impacted the household was that my mother worked in the shipyards. She was a Rosie the Riveter, a welder and a riveter making battleships. My father worked as a pile driver, that is building the docks that the ships would tie up at, and also was working in the war effort as well. He had volunteered to serve in the military, but they had turned him down because of his experience fighting in Spain. Mm-hmm. But both my parents were full-time working, and there were no facilities really for childcare that were very effective during that period of time. So one of the things that happened was that my mother set up a cooperative nursery school in the factory where she worked. And this was really the beginning of a kind of long career for her in working with nursery school children and setting up cooperative nursery schools.
But what year would that be? What year would that be?
That would have been 1943, 44.
Okay, so you're about 3-4 years old and you see this happening around you. But I mean, are there any recollections of that, or is it just these are things that you've been told?
Vague memories. Nothing's very specific about it. I would say that probably as a result of that, I was left on my own quite a bit. I think many of the people who grew up during that period had that experience of being in a family where there was a lot of preoccupation with what was going on outside the family.
That's important. I mean, in terms of impact on the person, and maybe you maybe got lots of times to think, a lot of time to think about things, all that as a person. I think that all those are important. Actually, those are the important. When I talk about evolution of a mediator, evolution, the fact that what you start off there, the thought process, which then takes over as you go along, like the interesting aspect of, well, a lot of must be happening subconsciously, definitely. I mean, for you to actually even pinpoint, I'm sure it's difficult, but we just try to get into the mind of the young Ken.
Well, once again, I don't think I'm particularly exceptional. I grew up in a mildly dysfunctional family where there were conflicts. I don't know if any of you know about Milton Erickson. He's a very famous hypnotherapist. He grew up in the 1950s, but he had polio, and he was in an iron lung in his house for many years, sitting in the kitchen of his house in this, not sitting, lying down in this iron lung in order to be able to help him breathe. And what he did was he watched people and discovered what was kind of taking place below the surface. He couldn't really participate very much in what was going on. He wasn't distracted by activity. And it gave him a unique perspective on some of the hidden dynamics of what was taking place. And I feel that from the very early age, I was watching people, trying to figure out what was going on, trying to understand their relationships. I'm sure that all of us had similar experiences.
No, your journey is special. And all of us, before you came in, was actually, we're talking about this. Your journey is special. You are modest, and we like that, but your journey is special. And that aspect of it needs to go out. The fact that what you're saying right now is actually very important. The fact that you got that time watching people, and that is a very important aspect, which as you go along in life, and obviously as a mediator, I think it's very helpful. I think these are things which you might overlook, but actually a very important thing, because look, this recording definitely will be out there. And the whole idea is that we have to identify the people with the mediator mindset and get them into the fold. People who might not be mediators today, but we want them, because the kind of those 10 points that you've put out need large numbers. And to get large numbers, we have to get the story out and obviously inspire, motivate, and get them into the fold. So everything that you might think is very, very frivolous or petty or this, that is important. It's not frivolous, it's not petty, it's important. And I will not talk too much. I'll just listen. But I'm just saying that is the larger thing that we are looking at. So I cut you off there. I cut you off.
No, that's fine. I guess to move the conversation forward, my parents left the San Francisco Bay Area where they were living as a result of going to college at Berkeley. My mother's parents rejected her marriage to my father because he wasn't Jewish, and my father's parents rejected his marriage to my mother because she was Jewish. And so we were kind of excluded on some level from both extended families, but at the same time there was a kind of opening for the children my brother and myself to belong to those families, even though there was conflict over what was taking place at that time. My parents moved down to Venice, California. My father had, both my parents were continuing to work in the war effort, and also were a part of the kind of progressive political activity that was taking place at that time. So we moved down to Venice, California, but McCarthyism had begun by this time. And because my father had fought in Spain, we were blacklisted. And it made it very difficult for him to find work.
But this would be about what year would this be?
This is the late 1940s, 1947, 48.
But
that was
now
when-
the recollection, I mean, I'm sure now the recollections are there in terms of your memory of these times. I'm sure now there must be images there and all that, right? You're
Yeah.
old enough, at this stage, you're old enough to see what's happening.
Well, I was able to understand some parts of it, but not very accurately. From a very early age, I think probably as a result of the war effort and being left by myself, I had a inner life that was always a very large part of what was of interest to me. I was interested in all kinds of things around me. And I would say that we were really lower middle class, maybe even a little bit lower than that. Working people, kind of type of salaries and households, renting space in various places. But I think probably the most significant event in my life really began in 1949 when we moved to the San Fernando Valley. Because my father was unable to get a job, we moved out to the San Fernando Valley and they started a chicken ranch.
Wow.
So really most of my upbringing was on in an agricultural, rural environment where we lived in this sort of small little lot in the middle of an orange grove at the connection between two dirt roads, and raised chickens.
And how many people around you?
My brother, my mother, my father, and myself.
But how old is your brother? Brother's older. He's older, or is he younger?
He's younger. He's 2 years younger.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that
And of course,
was good
it's
life. But that was
I'm
good
sorry?
life. That was good life on a farm.
life. Yes.
That you have to tell us about. You're not going to. I'm not going to let you skip through all this. It's going to be. We can stay in the 1940s today. Not an issue. But we want to get into each aspect. It's enjoyable also, and we also get into the mind of a person, and that's what we want to do. Get into your mind.
I started reading at a young age. I don't know that I was, the story from my parents was not that they taught me to read, but at some point they were reading a book to me and I corrected them when they made a mistake and was able to read it myself at a very young age. I would say that I was influenced by really two fundamental things. The first was that my parents were very, very committed. We would say this probably today as anti-racist, or people who are opposed to treating other people differently was how they would explain it. We are not people who call people names. We treat people fairly. I had Black friends as I grew up, Latino friends, particularly in the Valley. And it never occurred to me to think in discriminatory terms. My mother was a very active woman in her own right. She had her own career. My father was a kind of a feminist that is deeply respectful of women and the equality between men and women. So I grew up in a family where women and men really were treated as equals. It was not a patriarchal family at all. And I think probably like everybody else here who has siblings, some of your first conflict resolution experiences have to do with sibling conflicts, and how you handle the fact that there is, you're competing for a scarce resource, which is your parents' attention. And I would say that I began mediating at a relatively young age. I also began mediating between my parents. Not that I thought of it that way, I just tried to make things nice, tried to figure out what was wrong and see if I could do something that could fix it. I think one of the things that comes up from time to time for me in my mediation practice is something that I felt at that early age, which is somehow you are responsible for the conflicts around you. That if you were sort of able to somehow bring them together, their arguments would cease, and you would have a much better childhood. My parents didn't argue very much. They deeply loved each other, really were throughout their lives profoundly and romantically in love with each other. Even in his 80s, my father would sing romantic songs to my mother. And I always knew that was there, that they deeply loved each other. Sorry?
Would you remember any of those songs? I'm sure they're all there inside, recorded inside.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Can we ask you to sing, or we just ask you the name, the song?
Well, we grew up with a lot of music. Probably my earliest musical memory is Louis Armstrong playing the trumpet, and a lot of jazz music on the radio. My brother and I would dance to this music, and sort of serious jazz went on. And there was also, because they had gone to Berkeley, and my father really was an intellectual, even though he was working as a carpenter or a chicken rancher or whatever, there was a lot of classical music, and there were popular songs. The one that they told me that I sang, they would sort of bring me out to their friends, and when I was 2, and asked me to sing this song, and the song was accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, and don't mess with Mr. In Between. That was the song. So yay. But there was my mother, as a nursery school teacher, of course, sang quite a bit, and would had what was called an auto harp, a zither, and she would play and sing songs, and we would sing together. So we sang quite a bit as a family.
But what would a normal dining table situation be?
Well, that would, particularly on the chicken ranch, this was a family adventure. So I began work when I was 9, and I've worked pretty much continuously since then. And we're talking pretty serious work here, feeding chickens, cleaning up after them, I had my own chickens starting at age 11, really 10, maybe 11. My parents advanced me enough capital to be able to purchase my own chickens. So I had 20 chickens of my own, and I had an egg route. I went to work when I was 9, cleaning out horse corrals from at a neighboring stable, and earned enough money to buy myself a horse.
Wow.
So at the age of 10, I had bought myself my own horse, which I continued to feed and pay for through the money that I earned selling eggs and chickens. And we would also have ducks and turkeys. And so it was like a real farm with lots of different animals on it.
So the picture that you sent me, was that horse? Was that the
Yes,
horse? Or that was the horse?
that was the first horse.
I actually won't be able to share it right now with everyone. Better we can share it later. But that's a nice picture. We have to share it with people.
You can't, do you want to pull it up and
I can do that. I can do that.
screen or not?
Yeah, I'll do
You
that.
What?
I can do that.
It shows my parents and the horse and kind of a little bit about the ranch, but I was quite a bit older by this time. But I grew up on horseback. Well, I don't know what my parents were thinking to give a 10-year-old a horse of their own and just kind of let him go and do whatever he wanted. There, of course, I didn't have enough money to pay for a saddle. And I was way too little to get on the horse myself. So what we would have to do is lead the horse over to a patch where there was grass. The horse would put its head down to eat the grass, and we would sit on the horse's head. And then it would lift its head up and we would slide down its neck and then turn around and sit on the horse and be able to ride. And we went wherever we wanted. It was all agricultural, so we just rode this horse everywhere. And later I got a second horse, and my brother and I would go riding together. We had friends who had horses, and we would ride with them. And I learned an enormous amount about conflict resolution from horseback.
That's the one.
Yeah, there we are. That's my mother, my father, myself.
But what is the horse called?
And that's actually the second horse. That's Charm.
Okay. Well, that's the only picture I have. So. But
Yeah.
what was your father's name? My mother's name. I mean, we don't have that.
Richard, Dick. My mother was Shirley.
And this would be about what year?
Oh dear. I'm in high school. So I've got to be 15, 16, something like that.
Okay, so we've gone into the 50s. I actually thought we'll stay in the 40s. I thought we'll go in the 50s in the next episode.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I learned a lot about conflict resolution from horses. And I think from animals in general, we can learn quite a bit about human nature, about stubbornness, about evasion, about just sort of the different ways in which personalities confront one another and conflict with each other. The signals that we give each other that are nonverbal. So when I was riding with my horse and she wanted to go home, I could tell before she did anything that she was going to try to turn around and go back home again. And watching that body language and having this relationship, this deep, caring, really intimate relationship with another animal was quite profound and taught me a lot about also myself and my own stubbornness, my own places where I would get triggered by whatever my horse did. I would say that the second part of what was really important to me growing up was reading. I was really a pretty voracious reader, and from a very early age was reading novels and science books that my parents, when I was 9, 8 or 9 gave me a book called Boy Scientist, and I would do experiments in the garage. But science has throughout my life been an important part of my life. The discovery of a world that exists out there that is intricate and complex and absolutely gorgeous and endlessly fascinating. I think that also has a lot to do with conflict resolution. So we can think of conflict in many different ways. We can approach it holistically. We can also break it down into pieces. We can be reductionist about it. We can understand some of the science behind it. We can use science as a metaphor to understand some of the deeper components of conflict. We can use dimensionality. We can use criticality. We can use fractals. We can use mathematics. Lots of different ways of understanding conflict.
But tell me, when you talk about books, I mean, it's about science is one thing. What about the other books that you were reading at that time? What the other?
Well, I began, of course, with the standard children's books like Black Stallion and Jack London's White Fang and, very Call of the Wild, books of that sort. But I also read at an early age Dickens' Pickwick Papers, which was hysterically funny and still to this day can cause me to burst out laughing, especially the very first chapter on the meeting of the Pickwickians. This really happened a little bit later in junior high school. I discovered Greek drama and began reading Greek plays that were just stunning to me because here was something that had been written millennia ago and yet was so current, so clear, so profound and powerful. It was really quite gorgeous.
But on the first reading itself, you could get that, or this was number of readings and then you were actually getting into the heart of it, or was it just?
Oh, no. If you read Aristophanes, for example, it's really quite clear from the very beginning. I might not have understood it at a very deep level, but one of my favorite plays to this day, and I just reread it perhaps for the 15th time, I don't know, is the Oresteia trilogy by Aeschylus. The Murder of Agamemnon by Clytemnestra in Aegisthus, The Murder of Clytemnestra in Aegisthus by Orestes, and The Pursuit of Orestes by the Furies, the Intercession of Athena, the trial that takes place. This is incredibly powerful, dramatic stuff. And what it's concerned with is revenge and the creation of mechanisms to stop that revenge from continuing to turn in a circle, which at that point essentially was the trial, a trial conducted by Athena, in which he cast the deciding vote. And it was also, of course, the triumph of patriarchy over matriarchy. There's a whole lot going on in those three plays that is very powerful.
But why don't you take us through that? Look, one, you can assume that this is going out to people who would not have read, and you not just assume with me. You can be sure I have no idea. So it will be nice to hear from you how you read it and what you understood from it. Take us through that. It'll be nice, because personally, I have not read it, so it'd be really nice to someone else what you understood from it. I think it would be very nice to hear that.
Well, I suppose I must have begun with the Iliad and the Odyssey. The opening line of the Iliad which I still remember, the translation that I read was, I sing of the wrath of Achilles. That's the opening line of the Iliad. And the Iliad is a powerful epic story of course, the Trojan War, but it's especially a story of what happened within the Greek camp and the conflict between Achilles and Agamemnon. There's a recent book that was written more from a feminist point of view by Pat Barker, which is really taking the perspective of Briseis, who is the Achilles' consort taken by Agamemnon from him, and then all of the consequences that flow from that. These are primordial, really kind of what would we say, almost archetypal tensions, sources of conflict between people, the jealousy, the role of the wily Odysseus, and all done in a very poetic frame of reference, but elucidating the all of the love and the hatred and the jealousy and the fear and the bravery and all of this incredible human complexity. And even though the environment in which they lived was one that was very different from the one in which we live, we can still understand an enormous amount about the dynamics of conflict by reading literature. I think the same goes for the Odyssey and the struggles of Odysseus to return home to Penelope, and the violence and the sources of violence within those communities. But it was really, once you become grounded in the mythology, the people become familiar to you, as they were to the Greeks, of course. And probably Natasha can talk about this better than I can. I'm sure she has read much more of this than I have. But all of the Greek dramatists, Euripides, Aristophanes, Sophocles, all of these dramas are incredibly rich with human information. Do you agree with me, Natasha?
Right now, I'm keeping her on mute.
Yes,
We'll
I
get her
do.
in. We'll get her in later. We definitely, everyone is going to get in. I mean, right now, we just basically like I said, we were actually supposed to be in the 40s and then take everyone together and then go along. But
okay. Well, I don't know, Tom, whether you felt this, had this experience. Tom and I worked together in Athens, helping to train Greek mediators in dialogue facilitation techniques, particularly creating dialogues between immigrants and Greek citizens, and also developing mediation techniques. Tom did multiple trainings there. Greece is an extraordinary, absolutely wonderful country, but to actually go to Delphi and to be in the land of Socrates, this is really was a very moving experience for me, just having read all of this beforehand. But then to return to that incredible literature, really the awakening of consciousness in some deep and human way, was something that happened to me when I was a child. I imagine I must have been a teenager at the time, but I still recall the incredible power of Greek mythology I read Edith Hamilton's book on mythology before I was in high school, really. And I also became very interested in other aspects of literature. I read Thackeray and some of the great English novelists, Richardson, Joseph Andrews, a whole series of different books, Tom Jones. These are wonderful sources of self-discovery because a part of what empathy provides us with are complex, multiple sources of self. And we discover that in others, and we also discover it in ourselves. Tom, did you want to come in? I'm sorry.
I'm going to interrupt only to say when we were in Athens, Ken, it could be published as a book itself, wrote our team Bible and drew upon Greek mythology and all the Greek writers, and became the inspiration for all of us in creating a dialogue program, because he drew upon Plato and Socrates and all of the other Greek scholars. And so what he's talking about now, we lived that life in the times we were together in Greece through the inspiration of Ken. And I'll let you carry on, Vic.
This would be, Tom, in what year was this? I mean, I'm just trying to put ears to everything, so just to understand the chronology.
We jumped ahead a bit. It was 2013. Ken was asked by some people in Greece, and Ken built a team. So 2013, I think, was our first trip there. But the work, Ken, you began on it in 2012, I believe, the writings on it and the organizational things and all that, if I remember right. Correct me as you should.
So we're way ahead. We have to come back. We have to retract. Because, Ken, the thing is that I haven't read things. So if from what you have read and what you've understood from these books, if you tell us, at least for me, at least I can say I'm a little literate. Otherwise, I'll just stay illiterate. So.
Well, it's we are all in different places, and there's no there's no need for everybody to read everything that everybody else has read. It's just that every once in a while something will speak to you, and the things that speak to you are incredibly meaningful and powerful. And literature has that capacity. It can turn on a light bulb in a place that you had no idea that there was any light available for you inside yourself. And I think that literature is a way of practicing empathy. And it can be any form of literature at all. Right now I'm reading a number of novels. I'm reading one by Anthony Trollope called The Way We Live Now, which is quite extraordinary about what was taking place in England in the 19th century. Along with that is Gilead by Marilyn Robinson. A third one I'm reading is Shuggie Baines that just won the Booker Prize in England. And several, but every single one of these is an imaginary world. But we know more about those characters than we often know about the people around us. Somebody says, we know more about Anna Karenina than we know about our own mothers. And I think that is true, because we are able to explore the inner life of Anna Karenina thanks to Leo Tolstoy. And of course, the brilliant translation by Prevere and Volokhonsky.
But does it happen the other way around again? Now that you've read that, do you try to place that into real life around you when you're looking for those characters around you? Do you do that?
Yes, that's very nicely put, Vikram. And I think that's absolutely accurate. There is the sort of from the outside in, and then there is from the inside out. And you begin to see things in very different ways. This is one of the things that has been interesting to me throughout my life. And I'm not sure exactly where this came from. Maybe it must have come from something from my family of origin, because most things do. But And I remember this particularly in connection with my father, who was really a teenager when he went off to fight in Spain. He was in this really brutal war against Hitler before World War II began, and was damaged and injured in ways that as a child I didn't really understand. But here's what I did get at a relatively early age, that if there is something inside of you that you are not willing to look at, there will be things outside of you that you cannot see.
That's quite a
So,
statement.
yeah, and so, and I think that this is what happens in conflict. Conflict is a kind of knot in our energy and our capacity to experience the world, and our capacity for awareness. And as a result of that knot, there are things that that get distorted out of perspective, things we can't see, things we magnify when they shouldn't be, things we minimize when they shouldn't be. And so a part of what literature is helpful to, and is helping you figure out what those blind spots are inside yourself. The principal one, of course, is ego. And what ego does is it keeps the other person at too great a distance. It makes them a little bit more like a cardboard cutout and less like a real human being who can surprise you, who can do things that you don't expect, including becoming better than who they actually were, worse than who they actually were. All of those things are possible. And I would say that we tend to vacillate between two views of those around us. One is a kind of, particularly coming out of childhood, a kind of idealized version of who other people are, which sees them as somehow better than themselves, which discounts the negative parts of them. And I learned that from my mother, who was always able to find something interesting and useful and enjoyable in every person she met. And the second part is not really trusting that, realizing that the other person can actually be a danger to you, that there is something here that you don't necessarily understand. And there is a vacillation between those two things, between trust and sort of, I would say, kind of blind trust, and an equally blind distrust. But it's the third path that is the one that we want to see if we can discover, which is the combination of those those two different paths, and at the same time, something that is different from both of them.
Well, actually, Ken, what I'm trying to really do is that because of your experience and everything, you've been able to generalize and theorize. You have a theory on these things. But I'm trying to go reverse. I'm saying, what were those incidents? What were those situations because of which these theories came up? Because I want to bring it down. I want the person, not the theory. That's the whole idea. Yeah. I mean, in the sense, in the family, that situation that happened, that was an experience I had. Because of this, this was what the thought process was, which led to this theory, something like that. I mean, I'm just giving you a basic idea. I'm sure you understand what I'm trying to do.
I would say probably the two most important elements in growing up during the 1950s that really struck me powerfully and had a big impact on my life and helped me define who I was and helped me understand conflict. The first of those was having girlfriends and talking to them routinely. I had a list of, sort of 8 or 9 phone numbers on the bottom of my telephone, and I would spend, this is at a relatively early age, I guess, in early junior high school, over an hour every night just talking to girls. And I did this because I remember the realization that came to me that at some point I understood that they knew something that I didn't, about people, about the world, about life. And I wanted to figure out what that was. And I didn't even know how to ask the question. But I knew that it was there and that there was something there for me to learn. And the second part of this, I would say, was growing up in the San Fernando Valley in a period when there was quite a bit of racism still in place. Because we lived in this small, little, relatively impoverished, sort of tiny little chicken ranch, very close by was a migrant camp of agricultural workers, mostly from Mexico. And they were friends. They had children. We went to they lived in a tent, and they traveled and went through the fields of California, working in the fields, bringing in the harvest of the various crops. And they would go from one to another to another, but they would return every year. And at one point they settled there. Ralph Bermia was a very close friend of both mine and my brother's. And we would hang out with them and learn some kind of elementary Spanish, most of which you couldn't really repeat in polite company. And to just kind of have that experience of not only having those close friendships, but then being a part of a community in which those people were looked down upon.
But at no point of time you were looking at the aspect of looking down at them. For you, they were just friends.
Yes.
Or in the back of your mind, was there still this concept that in some way I am supposed to look at them differently? Did that ever come into your mind?
No, I don't feel that I ever slipped into the idea that I should be looking at them differently. I couldn't understand why other people did. And I attribute this to my parents and to the fact that I had just kind of grown up with the assumption that everybody was the same and everybody was equally valuable and important. And so it was shocking to me to discover that other people didn't think the same way. And when I went to junior high school, there was physical violence. I myself was in fights with other kids as a result of my friends being picked on, my Latino friends being picked on.
Some nicer things. What were you people doing together? What were the activities you were doing? Some nicer things also. The fights, yes, but
you mean with the other kids?
Yes. So we're trying to imagine a childhood. Look, kids today are doing very different things. I did different things, but people the generation before me would have done different things. So we just want to understand. We're trying to imagine. There's a picture that we're trying to create. So what is really happening there is what we're trying to understand. In terms of activities, what are you doing?
Well, a large part of what I did during those years was I was just on horseback, riding everywhere. A large part of what we did together was we would go into their community, that is into the Latino community, which was just a block away from where we lived, really, maybe 2 blocks. And we would eat homemade tortillas, help them grind corn to make the tortillas with. We would climb trees, play make-believe games, just do all kinds of kid stuff.
Yeah, but I want everyone to know that everyone does the same thing. Ken Cloke is Ken Cloke, but he also had a childhood. He also did those things. He wasn't sitting in one corner reading the Greek tragedies. He was doing other things also.
Yeah, well, I think everybody has had these little make-believe games that children play, which are quite wonderful. There's actually a nice little statement I just read the other day. Let me see if I can find it. It was that, oh yeah, from Linda Berry. She says, at the center of everything we call the arts and children call play is something which seems somehow alive. And I think that this is something that I think children have some feeling for, and to some extent as grown-ups we do, but we lose sight of. Energy is real. The energy of our connection is real. It is something that we can touch, something that we can feel. And a part of what is missing in mediator training, I think, is something that children have some sense of, which is how to turn that energy in the direction of the creation of an environment, of a world that everybody can participate in together. And this is a kind of play is just a way for people to bounce their energies off of each other, to connect with each other through their energy. But we miss a great deal of what happens in conflict resolution because we miss this, some deep understanding of what this energy actually is. But I think it's real. We can call it spirit, and some people do. There are lots of different names we can attach to it. But the fundamental thing that is taking place is life is connecting to life. Some unique human being somewhere is able to actually join with some other completely unique individual in some common enterprise. And that commonality has an energetic component. I hope that isn't too weird, but that's how it feels to me.
Look, everything that you say, we'll have to go through the recording and hear it again for it to actually seep in. So it's going to happen.
Okay.
So those words of wisdom definitely are, but good thing is we have the recording, so we can actually go back to. But I'm still going to go back to childhood. I'm still going to go back to your brother and you, your relationship. What was happening there? I mean, you people had the same group of friends, or you were doing other things?
Well, no, like all siblings, I think we had some friends in common, but there was also competition between us. There's always the knowledge of who's the oldest and who's the youngest. And there are times when we look out for each other, and there are times when we are completely opposed to each other. There are differences of personality, different perceptions of who your parents are, different relationships with each of those parents. And the parents themselves have different expectations and attitudes towards each of their children. I would say that from my point of view, I was always kind of looking out for my younger brother. But I don't know that he would have seen it that way.
But did you actually end up discussing these things as you grew up? Did you talk about all this?
Much later, yeah. He's now a psychotherapist, very successful psychotherapist. And we have a very close relationship. We see each other not every week, but certainly several times a year. And we get together and share things. We are connected with each other online mostly right now because of COVID. But we have this a very close connection.
But you do end up, you do end up looking back and saying, I mean, now because obviously you people are professionals who actually are working with people, and you can actually maybe dissect a lot of things today. So you do go back and say that at that point of time, this is the way I was behaving, and this and that. All those theoretical discussions happen. Do they have?
Yeah, mostly it's about our very, very different experiences of our parents. My way of saying it now is that no two people grow up in the same family.
Yep.
Everybody has a different family experience. Every sibling experiences the family differently. What is the true family? I think it's some combination of all of those experiences.
But did you ever get into this? Why does that happen? How come
Yeah.
two people do actually have that perception, different perception? Is there anything that you've gone into that?
I think that we both experienced, particularly my father, differently, because my father was, kind of an intellectual, and I was much more of an intellectual, even from a very young age, whereas my brother was not. And he felt, I think, judged by my father and not appreciated by him. And that was a very big part of his growing up. The second part is that in elementary school, it doesn't really matter that much, or junior high school, it's not such a major thing. But in high school, it became a significant thing because I was very successful in high school. I was student body president of my high school and very active in virtually all the different fields that one could be active in. Received lots of awards and honors and things of this sort. And I think that he felt it was difficult growing, coming just a bare 2 years behind that.
But were you making things easier for him or difficult for him?
I think I probably made things more difficult, at least in that sense. Yeah. I think my intention was to make things easy for him. But there's a part of that that is actually subtly undermining. Freud has a phrase which he calls counterfeit nurturance. And counterfeit nurturance is helping someone in a way that undermines their belief in their ability to help themselves. And I think there was some piece of that by extending a helping hand, you can communicate that you don't believe the person is capable of helping themselves. I don't think that was my intention at all, but I think that might have been the effect.
Yeah, I mean, in the sense how the other person perceives it, obviously you would also not know. I mean, how that will happen when it happens. Yep. But in terms of discussion, say with your father, the kind of conversations you were having and what your brother were having, were there different kinds of conversations happening there?
Very different, very different. My father was very interested in, even though we were still chicken ranchers, but he read voraciously and would talk about the things that he read. And we would talk about them together, only I was more interested in the content of what he was talking about than my brother was. So that was a difference. But he would talk about history, he'd talk about philosophy, he'd talk about politics. And so I grew up with those kinds of discussions and conversations.
No, but they were discussions. I mean, you were actually, in whatever way, contributing to it. It wasn't just
Yes and no. Yes and no. I would say as a child, I thought that it was more discussion than probably it actually was. I think that my father was mostly sort of telling me what he thought and having someone who was willing to listen to him. I think it must have been very lonely for him to be, sort of living in this world and not having anybody he could really share this with.
I know that's exactly what I'm saying, because these are things that obviously you know that you were living in that situation. But today, if a person doesn't understand that what were those times living in that ranch, what was the situation like in terms of people around, communication channels, all those things. Today we can't actually go back and even understand what that life could have been. So something you can take us through there.
Well, a lot of the life that we lived was around the chickens and the turkeys and the ducks and the geese, feeding them, every morning. My brother and I would feed the animals. My father didn't really do that part of it. That was really considered to be our task. I had promised early on when I got the first horse, that I would be responsible for feeding the horse, which I was, and for even purchasing the feed and making sure the horse was fed. So I was up early every morning, feeding, doing chores, and then would be off to school, usually by bicycle or walking, maybe a couple of miles to the local school. And then coming back in the afternoon, again, doing chores. And then my parents would have what was called a delivery route. They would sell chickens or turkeys over Thanksgiving and Christmas. And we would raise them. We would take them in to be slaughtered, packaged, and take them out and deliver them.
But what is the population that we're talking about? How many people are around you? What kind of a setup
It's
is there?
just the four of us the whole time.
In terms of the with the delivery that you're doing, how many houses are there? How far are they?
Yeah. Well, we had it was a very small little ranch. We had maybe a couple hundred people that we would deliver to. The big time of year was, of course, Thanksgiving and Christmas. So those were times of plenty. All of the clothes that we wore were purchased for us at Christmas. That was the only time when we had any money, really.
Right.
And so we got everything that we wore at Christmas time. And we had lots and lots of presents every Christmas, just because there were turkeys and we would all of a sudden have this flush of money. But that didn't, of course, last. In the beginning, this was a way of surviving, but as a small family farm, sooner or later competition began. Large ranches began moving in, consolidating the small ones. You can see this in virtually any agricultural community. It's the operation really of capitalism and monopolization, and the coming in of the large corporations and the taking over of the small ones, etc.
But what you said in that one sentence or two sentences is a number of years of activity. So you'll have to take us through that. What changes you saw, and in terms of the approach of people and the way people changed over that, I'm sure all those things you observed, because you were obviously observing people. So that also you have to take us through. It's not going to be. I'm not going to let you go through two sentences for 10 years. It's not going to happen. So you'll have to take us through slowly, because those changes are important. Because those changes, obviously, what effect they had on you is one, on society in general, what you were observing around you. So all those things have an impact on how you develop as a person. And obviously for us, the evolution of a mediator, that aspect. So you'll have to take us slowly through all that.
Well, I think that probably one of the how would I say this? One of the most important things in childhood is to develop a sense of confidence in yourself. And I really had lots of opportunities to do this. One year I earned more money than my parents did from my egg route and selling chickens and ducks and the geese. The ducks and the geese were all mine. And I, when I was 11, 12, maybe I was 13 or 12 or 13, I purchased the full set of the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Again, Ken, when you say that, a lot of people in this generation will not understand that whole volume, that whole bookshelf. It's going to be one little one Google search or one app will take care of everything. So you have to explain the concept of those volumes, that how many books there West.
Well, it's 30 large volumes filled with information about the world. And for me, this was incredibly exciting to be able to have access to information about everything in the world. But part of it also was being able to afford it myself out of my own earnings.
That's big. That's big, actually. At that age, it's big.
It was really big, yeah. And I learned very early on the value of work but for me, it wasn't work in a negative sense at all. It was all sort of, how do I say this? Being able to plan the kind of life you want to have and to actually then bring it into existence through activity. And to feel good about it, to be able to, and I was able to contribute money out of my earnings to my parents when they needed it. One year I paid for a new roof on our house out of my earnings. And it wasn't, these are not large earnings. I want to be real clear here. This is small scale stuff.
No, we're talking about a young person. For that person, it is a large earning. It's a large earning.
Yeah.
So it's all relative. Large is, I mean, in that sense, relative.
Yeah, but I would gather, I would feed the chickens in the morning. I would gather the eggs. I would candle the eggs, meaning to look up against a light to make sure that they were okay, clean them, put them in egg containers, drop those into a little cart and wheel the cart around what we could call a neighborhood, but it wasn't very much of a neighborhood. There were just kind of scattered houses. So I would have about maybe a 5-mile route that I would go around, and I would deliver eggs to people who would get fresh eggs and probably feel sorry for me because I was this little kid walking around with my egg carts.
We have to see a picture of that period. I haven't seen. I mean, you have to show us one of those pictures.
Yeah. I'm not sure I have one, but maybe I do.
You must see that.
So I think that was largely it. I would say that we were a happy family on some level, and at the same time there were sources of discomfort and conflict within the family. My father had grown up during Prohibition. And had an alcohol problem like many other men of that period, women as well. And one of the interesting things about reading this novel, Shuggie Bain, that just won the Booker Prize, is the description of alcoholism and what it actually does and how it impacts people. And so to see that taking place, and to understand that a lot of what my parents had believed in and fought for and been willing to lay their lives down for was now over, had changed fundamentally. And I have had this experience myself, so I can understand how difficult it is coming out of the 1960s and being very, very much of an activist in that period. And then to have things change fundamentally is something that requires some resilience and involves a measure of grief and loss. The loss kind of a beautiful dream of how things might be. The difficulty of figuring out who you are going to be now that a relatively easy source of identity is no longer available to you.
But how did you handle that? I mean, what were the...
Well, I think the difficulty is how do we handle it?
Yep.
And I think everybody handles it slightly differently based on their childhood experiences, figuring out whether they have the resilience and the resources and believe in themselves in various ways, how deeply damaged they have been, how whether somebody has believed in them in some really fundamental way. And I would say that my parents really believed in me, and that gave me tremendous strength. And then to have had these experiences enabled me personally to be able to get through that period, but not without difficulty myself. I think we all have difficulty in these periods of transition when the kind of source of identity that we have had, which can be another person, a family member or a loved one. It can be an activity, which all of a sudden is now removed from us. It can be a belief system, and now all of a sudden that belief system is gone. What happens then? What do we do? What do we go back to? What do we rely on?
But in that present, because this is what when you look back and you say, oh, I mean, you look at, but when in that present, what was really happening in your mind? What was going on? How were you really handling it?
Well, I didn't really understand, so far as my father's alcoholism was concerned, I didn't really understand that very deeply. And it wasn't something where he was completely dysfunctional in the way that many people have been. But for me, it was a kind of rite of passage, in the sense that what it meant was my father, who has been really, kind of a major part of our family, has a problem. I now have to step up as the next in line and make sure that my family is okay.
But you have support. You have people that you have support. You're talking to people. Are there people who giving you some kind of emotional or anyway in some kind of nothing?
No, nothing like that.
Okay,
No,
so
no.
you were on your own. You had to figure things out totally on your own. That was very tough.
There was a kind of community. My father started something called the San Fernando Valley Poultry Cooperative, which consisted of other chicken ranchers in the valley. And he became, sort of the head of that organization. And so there was a kind of community, but it wasn't really very close. And it wasn't emotionally very close. And at the same time, we were still, my father's parents had died relatively early. My mother's parents were still around. They lived in Long Beach, and we would see them occasionally. But basically, the grandparents were at a great distance, and we were pretty much a little family out in the middle of nowhere, figuring out how to live and survive on our own.
But what we need to do, Ken, is because obviously the people around us also should get involved in the discussion. So let me ask if someone else wants to come in to ask Ken something right now, because these discussions are going to continue. So MC, anything you want to come in?
I'd like to ask something, sir. May I ask something?
Yeah,
Hello?
please, Natasha, please.
I would love to ask something to Mr. Cloke. What was exactly the moment that you realized something that triggered you inside and you said, I'm a mediator, that's my mission, that's what I have to do, you see, because I'm an attorney for many years and it just happened once in my lifetime that I realized that, being an attorney was not enough for me, was not that completed me. And when I started and did my first training in mediation, I felt like a jet lag, like I traveled in another planet, like I was landed in another land. And I was amazed and I understood that this was something more for me. So just I took this path. And until now, although in my country it's not so popular so far, and we have struggling to earn money from this as a profession because it's still not so let's say widely known to people. I have this gut feeling that this is what I have to do, and it was just an insight I had from the training, all this, and also the self-awareness, because I was ready at that time. I did my journey in self-awareness, and I believe that mediators must not only be good professionals, but also they must be a little bit, let's say, educated human beings. They have to work with themselves. Do you agree with that? But still, my question is, when did your,
So that is, Natasha, that is exactly what we're doing right now is going through Ken and his life, his experiences, and then we'll come to this question that you asked him. Is the major one, but we really want to figure out at which point we were going to ask this question. Right now, we're just flowing. We're trying to imagine. We're
Thank you
creating
very
this
much.
world.
I'm
You're going to
sorry,
be.
I don't know if I have the time to follow you live because I have lived to another webinar, but still I will listen to your answer via the recorded video because I'm
And
very
everything is not happening today. These conversations are going to go on, and Ken is going to take us through that, and then he's going to get to that point that when was that whole that enlightenment? When did Buddha get his enlightenment situation?
Sorry,
Well, Vikram, why don't we have a spoiler today and have a short answer on that today?
No.
Because
Ken, what do you think?
really, I back Natasha on wanting to know that.
Then that's like the end. That's the end of the story you want now.
It's the beginning of the story.
Okay, Ken, please.
It's the beginning of the
Don't give
story.
everything out right now. Only a little teaser.
There isn't enough time, but here, thank you, Natasha, for your question. It's really very nice. And I think for myself, everyone has their own answer here, but for myself, I would say looking back, there have been elements of my life that have been mediative. But the moment when I realized that I was a mediator, it was like this blinding flash, like you said. I was working as an administrative law judge, and I had been settling cases. I had kind of felt uncomfortable as a judge for a long period of time. And I can tell you some stories about that with Vikram's permission.
Yes, exactly. No.
But,
you can't. This is now we're talking about 90. Which year is this that you're talking about? This is
1980.
Yeah. So I mean, we have about at least 20 years to go through. At least the whole civil rights movement has to happen. All that has to happen. So let's take it.
There was one moment, which was very simply, I went to a lecture about mediation, and within really 2 minutes, I knew that my life had fundamentally changed. Why? Because it struck such a resonant chord. It was something that I knew without knowing that I knew it. And I picked that up from what you were saying too, Natasha, that it was just a kind of, all of a sudden something came together. You came into some area where you hadn't anticipated that there was this whole new world here, but it made sense of all the other worlds you'd always lived in.
No, that's why I'm saying, Ken, why I was not wanting to get there is because this was like a culmination of lots of things that you had gone through. So now that culmination, to reach that point, we'll have to go through the entire series, and then that whole culmination has to happen. That is why I was not wanting to get there, because there is so much more. Now, it's not just the fact that as a child, what you saw, that culmination was so many 20 years after that also what all happened, which definitely we need to discuss. So we can do it on an episode after this. Let's just have a general, let everyone come in on a general conversation, but not go into these serious discussions. Stefano, anything? Stefano, please. Stefano is in Italy, and he's also a trainer. But Stefano, you can tell us about yourself better than I can.
Thank you, Vikram. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I wanted to ask that as you spoke about feeding the animals and having those tasks that mostly in our age children may not have. I was wondering if that helped you to increase your capacity to empathize with other not human, but with other alive beings, right? Because I have this feedback. I never had animals when I was a kid. I have them now because of my wife, and having the task of even if it's a burden, having the task of bringing them out, feeding them, helped me a lot in perceiving the needs of another alive.
No, that's a very important. I think that's very interesting. Yes, I think Ken.
Beautifully said, Stefano. I think that's exactly right. There are so many levels in which it's important for us to sort of recognize that we are just one of many life forms on this planet. And I think there's a complex set of relationships that happen with humans and animals. One is the act of giving, of feeding, of nurturing, of caring for some animal that actually does not speak English, or plants as well. And I've always had this affiliation for plants and animals. To this day, I feed the birds every morning when I wake up. But for me, it's a way of giving to the planet that has given to me. It's also a way for me to understand some elements of non-verbal communication. It's a way for me to discover the part of myself that sometimes wants to and sometimes doesn't want to, or is tired, or whatever may happen. So in other words, there's this internal conversation that takes place about what the source of this is for you. But to me, it's just a source of joy and pleasure. I think, kind of underlying element of that joy is not just connection with something that is outside of you and incredibly different from you, but the discovery of that different being inside yourself. That's the place where the empathy really arises. There's a famous problem in neurophysiology, which is the problem of consciousness, sometimes referred to as the hard problem of consciousness. But one element of that is an article that was written by a neurophysiologist many years ago, the title of which was, "What is it like to be a bat?" And it's a great title because it asks us a question of, what is it like to imagine living in some completely different physical form? Well, on a small scale, we face this with each other. And our experience with animals, with life, even with plants, can help us have some understanding of how to interact with people who are completely different, from different cultures, that don't share any of the same backgrounds. And in this way, I feel like, as I was saying before, my own background is just one of many. I don't know that it's really that interesting to you, but I'll do my very best to pull out what I think might be interesting to you. What is interesting, however, is that I think for each of us, there are these moments when we come alive, when love moves inside of us, and we are able to connect with another person and become a better human being as a result of that connection. So good for your wife in having those animals, Stefano. And
Exactly.
she's one.
Thank you, because that was exactly what I was meaning. Exactly what I was meaning. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Yes. Thank you.
It allows you to see even the nonverbal, the way after 10 years I've learned to understand the eyesight of a dog. That is something that what it wants in that specific moment. It's fantastic. I think it's really good.
Yeah.
But
Very good.
Andrew, would you want to ask Ken something?
I was going to make a joke, but it probably wouldn't go down well. But I was going to say that
No, it will.
you probably have. You don't have animals. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I've got a problem with my internet. It's Saturday afternoon and it always drops because I'm told by the engineer that every child in the neighborhood is on TikTok, and that's the reason. But I've forgotten that I was going to say when Stefano was talking about what he learned from the animals. I think when you live with someone for long enough, you are all the time picking out tips from them. And maybe after 15, 20 years, you may just get a clue. As I'm on a second time round, I can tell you I never got it right the first time round with picking up on all the tips. But Ken, thank you. Some really wonderful points. And the last time I saw you was actually in London. I was just looking, it was 2017 at the CIARB symposium. And you were about to rush off to Scotland to go and talk to the Parliament and then appear on the news that night, I remember. But you said a line, and I haven't remembered it, so I actually typed it. You said, if there's something inside that you're not willing to look at, there will be some things on the outside you cannot see. And I wonder if that's yours or that's someone. I should know who said it, but I don't know who said it. You said it. Yeah, right. And I thought that the reason I immediately typed that, I thought it was absolutely fantastic and sums up so much in terms of life itself, how we interact with people, but certainly in terms of turning it to mediation, it actually encapsulates what I'm seeing more the more I mediate. And I think it has a lot to do, and I was just remembering that you were sharing the stage with John Stocker at the time in London.
Sure.
And he's recently written an article, which I'm sure you've seen, which is about people going through litigation. The vast majority are suffering from post-traumatic stress. And for another time, but I deal with a lot of people who are going through and have gone through post-traumatic stress. And I agree with that completely. And I think that phrase actually encapsulates some of the issues of people who are suffering from whatever we want to call it, whether it's post-traumatic stress or just dealing with litigation. It's the inability to look at things perhaps as they are, which makes it impossible for them to see the perception how others are seeing it from the outside, and certainly makes it impossible. So I thank you for that, because I will try and take that in. And Stefano, apology for the repetition, because you heard this earlier. I love the phrase, and it wasn't me who made it up. It is perception is selective, not objective, and I think it fits in. It fits in very much with that.
Very nice, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank
yes,
you.
I would say that, we can think of trauma or any of any conflict as a kind of black hole that warps light. And so it becomes actually impossible for light to escape on some level from that metaphoric black hole, but it also distorts everything around it. So you have something that under Einstein's general theory of relativity is called gravitational lensing, in which the light from a distant star is split and recombined. So you may see two stars where in fact there are only one, as a result of the bending of light. Well, I think it's somewhat similar internally, if we use this metaphor, and certainly the intensity of that experience makes it much more powerful a phenomenon. There are various features of it, one of which I have found politically, particularly in this recent period, that I've written about in an earlier book, and I call it accusation as confession. And that is the knowledge that there is something inside, and the inability to see it can take the form of an externalization and a shifting of that externalization into an accusation, meaning that you will accuse someone of doing something that you yourself are doing. So we find, for example, in the United States today, the accusation of an election being stolen by people, some people who are actually trying to steal it, as an illustration. And we're starting to get into the political arena now, but I think that it's important to see that this exact same thing happens in conflicts. Have you ever accused someone of doing something that you yourself were either doing yourself or inclined to do yourself? Or have you seen this in others? And I think this is one area. Another area where I think it shows up is not being able to trust the other person because you're getting now a distorted image as well as a true image of what that person actually is, who they are, what they stand for, what they're likely to do. And that distortion will make it difficult for you to trust anything that the other person does. And I think there are those are just two examples, but we can go on and we can say that there are a series of ways in which that happens. There's a nice little piece by Anna Freud, Sigmund's daughter, called Ego and Its Mechanisms of Defense. And it's about 13 ego defense mechanisms that are commonly used, in which the last one was invented by Anna Freud, called identification with the enemy or the oppressor. And each one of these is a kind of way of handling the distorted area inside, the little knot, the little twist inside. So I'm hoping that's helpful. We can explore that, I think, in greater detail, maybe in another conversation.
Yeah, but Ken, first of all, we have to fix up the next one. Whenever you have time, let's do that, because I don't want it to be, it was never going to be one session, like I told you. It was never going to do that. I was never going to do that. So whenever you have time, we'll keep doing it. So whenever next you have time.
Thank you. And thank you, Vikram, for doing this, for being curious and for asking these questions. I'm hoping that this is interesting to people. If not, we can always talk about what is.
No, it's very interesting. Ekta has one question for something to ask. Ekta,
so Ken, it was lovely hearing you, and your insights were fantastic. My question is, when you mentioned about connecting and you're connecting people, in a world today where we're getting, while we're getting more connected with people, but the connection is happening digitally. Digitally, we have a persona that we show online, and there's a reality offline. Now, can you share some insights as to how you perceive connections in this real and unreal world?
Beautifully put. Thank you. I think we can look at this in three separate ways. First, we can look at it traditionally as a problem that we can find in other media. Secondly, we can look at it in terms of electronic media today. And third, we can look at it in terms of the future and what is likely to happen as we move forward into an increasingly digitally organized world. What we haven't taken into account, I think, in our practice is two incredible scientific innovations that are going to be, really three, that are going to be dominant in future decades. One of those is artificial intelligence. A second is quantum computing. And a third is virtual reality. That is the Oculus Rift glasses that allow you to immerse yourself in a completely different world. And so if we look at it from that vantage point, we can see both positive and negative features moving forward. I would say that those of us who have been on in mediation sessions online, we've all had some experiences of what these are like. From my own perspective, there are two things that have happened. One is there has been less intimacy and a less tangible connection between people, a felt connection. People are at something of a distance from one another as we are now, and we would be feeling differently if we were all actually in the same room with one another. And the second is because of that separation, some of the conflicts that have taken place between people have just taken a different form. They are expressed now electronically rather than, interpersonally through interaction, direct interaction. So there's some pieces that are missing that are positive, and there are some pieces that are missing that are negative. At the same time, what happens is sometimes people, for me, have been more honest about things that they have been experiencing. In coaching calls, for example, I find that where people may have been reluctant to tell me certain things in the past, they are now a little bit more willing to say those things because I'm at a bit of a distance from them. In any event, that's just a sensation about it. Here, I think that the remarkable thing moving forward is going to be the combination of artificial intelligence and quantum computing. With artificial intelligence, we are now able to solve problems that were completely unsolvable before. A Chinese artificial intelligence quantum computer just reached what is called quantum supremacy, in which it did a calculation that would have taken the smartest supercomputer on the planet hundreds of thousands of years to complete, and it did it in a matter of minutes.
But where all do you see where all can that be used? What would you think?
So here's the deal. They have now used quantum computing and artificial intelligence to, number one, more accurately identify cancerous cells in sort of microscopic photographs of cells than humans can. They've been able to identify the different ways in which proteins fold, which will allow them to manufacture drugs that could not have been manufactured before. They are now turning quantum computing and artificial intelligence in the direction of solving social problems. But they haven't yet been turned in the direction of conflict resolution. But there is a group in Geneva, Switzerland, that is funded by the EU, that is a part of what's called the Blue Brain Project, which has been funded to the tune of over €1 billion, that is researching. It's the only research group that I know of anywhere in the world that is researching conflict and conflict resolution. It is putting people in functional MRI machines and putting them in conflict situations and seeing what happens in their brains. They're doing experiments to see what happens in their brains in conflict. And they are seeing what happens with mediation. And what they have demonstrated now for the very first time scientifically is that mediation actually works with couples, that it successfully allows them to shift out of the conflict processing centers of their brains, their little amygdala and the limbic system in general, and into a kind of problem-solving center of their brains. And now they're on the verge of figuring out they have identified some things that help them do that, but they are on the verge of figuring out many, many other things that can help them do that. Well, that's pretty remarkable. And if we now think about how we might be able to apply that in our field, we could develop approaches to human communication that could be much, much more effective. I think that we are, however, experiencing, particularly with the pandemic, heightened fear, which manifests itself in the form of paranoia, including political paranoia, heightened sort of suspicion of others, which manifests itself in conspiracy theories, distrust of science, even to the point of not accepting that a bacteria is a bacteria, a virus is a virus, and they can be transmitted by air. And if you don't wear a mask, you're at a risk of catching it. Even such a simple proposition as that, or a simple proposition which says there are greenhouse gases, we are producing them. We are out producing oxygen by a massive amount. And we can predict scientifically what the consequences of that will be. So what that means is we have to now pay attention to the planet that we live on, to the environment that we create around us, to each other, and not slip into prejudice, bias, discrimination, stereotyping, all of the different ways that we have of justifying depriving other people of something that they need in order to live and survive.
But Ken, you have this little guest, that little audience of yours.
But before she says anything, Ken, you know what the challenge?
No, she has to
with
say
AI
it.
is
Ekta,
also-
well, you can't do this. You can't do this. She has to say what she has. She's the audience now. This is Ken, whom Ken has to get to.
Hi,
What's your name?
Nina.
Hi, Nina.
Because I'm telling you, Ken, these are the people whom we have to reach. They're the smart ones.
Totally
And they're really
right.
smart. This one's really smart. This one I know about.
Absolutely, I can see.
Yes, a lot of books.
Yeah, there are lots of books. Lots and lots of books.
But
You have like a full library.
Yeah, it's a library.
He lives in a library, Nina.
Yeah.
it's a
Yes.
but I think the library is
pick on
inside the head.
something?
The library inside the head, we have to access that one.
No,
But-
I
Can
love that room. Every time I see Ken at a meeting, I love that room and I'm so jealous of it. Like, I want one.
Yeah, they become your friends and they speak to you. So there's a little book that says, "Remember me," and that's really wonderful.
But again, is there somewhere that you have to be right now?
Yes, I do need to sign off.
Yeah. When is the next one? When are you giving us time?
But we can go on calendar and we can figure out a time.
Later? You want to do that later? You want to do that later?
Well, I think we might. It'll take everybody.
No, we have to go by. We have to go by your time. The only issue is that when it's 8:30 a.m. there, it's 10 o'clock at night here. So I'm not at my conversational best at this time. So if the earlier it can be, the better it is for me. And we can get Australia into it also, because those people obviously is late. Some of them wanted to be here, but it was a little late for them.
How about
Vikram,
Saturday?
he can change the minds of people who believe in viruses, but he can't change the time in the US.
No, he's just fixing up. Ken is just.
That's pretty fixed.
Yeah, yes, Ken. What were you saying? What was the?
8:30 on February 6th.
Okay, that's a long time. I thought we'll do them earlier.
The difficulty is I have appointments or trainings that I'm doing.
Okay. Perfect.
before then.
No, we go by your convenience totally. It's just that this whole,
Okay.
everything is in our mind, fresh in our mind right now. All the chicken and the eggs are all there. So we just, but doesn't matter. We'll do it on 6th at 8:30 a.m. Pacific time.
Okay.
Yep. Perfect.
Thank you all for doing this. I really appreciate your interest, and it's been a pleasure talking with you. And what I am hoping is that we will make all of this interesting to you, not just about me, but about your lives and what's important to you. My hope is that this will help you reflect on some of the elements in your life that have contributed to your conflict resolution skills and capacity.
No, and the important part is that taking the entire group together and do all those things that you have with your years of experience come down to, I love those 10 points. Now it's not a theory that you have to read, it's those 10 points. So I want everyone getting involved and working towards that. So that is the whole idea. But we'll get there after we've gone through the phases, stages, so that at least we have time. It could be a slow process. The conflict revolution will happen.
I hope so. Thank you, Vikram.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ken.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Ken. And happy inauguration on Wednesday.
Thank you, Vikram.
Yeah.
Happy inauguration to all Americans online.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the world.
Okay, Ken is leaving. We are still here. Only Ken is leaving.
Happy but safe inauguration. Wish us safety.
We wish
Yes.
you safety.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Ken. Bye.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, Ken.
Thanks, Ken. Bye, everyone.
Yes. Hi, Ilan.
Thank you,
Well
everybody.
done, Vikram.
Hello.
Yes. Ilan is here. We haven't met him. Ilan, you want to introduce yourself to us?
Ilan,
You're on mute.
Yes, you're on mute.
Most famous phrase of 2020.
Yes. Well, thanks, Vikram. That was wonderful. My name's Ilan. I'm from London originally. I did a master's degree in conflict resolution and mediation at Tel Aviv University graduated in 2014. And I've been a trainer since 2015. And I started working as a mediator in 2018, doing community cases in Brighton. And now during the pandemic, I'm working remotely and also keeping up with the training at Tel Aviv University each year. So it's nice to meet everyone. I really enjoyed the session. I'm looking forward to the rest of the series.
But Ilan, what I missed out on, where are you currently? Where are you right now?
Right now, I'm in Italy, actually. I got stuck here.
Where in Italy? Where in Italy?
Right at the top in Como, very close to the Swiss border. Very, very beautiful part of the world. So
on Lake Como or somewhere around that?
On Lake Como, yeah.
Wow,
so
that
very
should be
nice view to wake up to in the morning.
Lucky man.
Yeah, very lucky. Yeah.
I'm sure you're hoping that the lockdown continues. And you just stay there.
Yeah, I mean, it's not good for the working situation, but yeah, at least I'm able to do some work online, so I'm grateful for that. But yeah, nice to meet everyone. Thank you, and have a nice evening. And
thank you very
good
much.
night, Vikram.
Good night. Thanks a lot for
Ilan,
coming in.
I managed to find Ilan before you go. I managed to find everyone else on LinkedIn, but I couldn't find you. Are you on LinkedIn?
Okay. I am. Yes, absolutely. Let me just share my link quickly.
You'll find Andrew Miller for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
And
yes, I'll find you.
Andrew Miller is not a difficult person to find.
I'll put my link.
I don't think you're not the founder of Growth Marketing, are you?
Oh no, that's the other Ilan Bass, who's also from London.
That's the one who keeps coming up. And I found you on Twitter.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Why don't you send him? I send him a connection request, Ilan.
Yes, I'll do that. Okay, 1 second. I mean, we don't have to stick around for this.
Joya, are you there or have you left? Joya was giving us a nice presentation. Only thing I cut her short there.
I'd like to hear from Nina more than anyone else.
Yes. Nina is definitely. We kept her here for that.
She's been dying to get a conversation in for the last 2 hours. She's been hovering around.
Well, I'd like the presentation.
Nina, yes, Nina, what did you think?
Lisa, do you still have the pet cat that you showed me in the other?
I do. I have to look for it. Wait a minute. I think it's right here beside me on the floor. Let me get it.
Actually, Andrew, the situation is that Nina's job was to get her mother to sleep because we were
Yeah.
having these meetings which were going on a little too long. So she used to come in, and the problem was that she took it against me, that you are not letting my mother sleep. Why do you keep talking to her? She should go and sleep. So this is the thing.
It was actually
Acha.
not about sleeping. It was about eating dinner.
Yeah, that is. It has to be eaten on time.
Dinner.
Get to Vikram. If you're going to talk about Nina, you've got to get your facts right. I'm afraid, you know.
She's
But
really missed talking to Vikram. Vikram, I mean, I think she's really happy that I'm back on the calls.
Yes, but Nina, you could have got me on a call earlier. Your mother might be busy, but you can talk to me.
Of course I do.
No, you take that. You just give me a call whenever. Touch, just one call. Your mother is too busy. I mean, she hasn't had time to come to our meetings. But, so these are. But Joya, please, I cut you off that time. I cut you off. You were saying something, and I said this is going to be one presentation. I have to cut you off because that can go on for 2 hours. I have to stop.
Absolutely fine. No, I enjoyed this so much, and I just typed that I unfortunately have to log off in a bit because I have another meeting pending, but I enjoyed this so much, and yeah, I'd love it if we can discuss all that we discussed in the advocacy and activism small
Yes.
talk we had with Tom.
So let's do that. You tell me whenever. Let's fix up a meeting, and then let's call everyone and let's have a discussion on that.
Well, yeah, only if I feel like a lot of people present here are much more have much more expertise and experience in the field. So I'd love to learn from them first. But I would love to, yeah, share whatever I know so far, humbly know so far.
Look, the
Yeah.
main thing is that if you're not giving them a presentation, everything is good. Just the idea. Look, the point is when you were in that webinar, the main thing that I've been telling everyone is that the objectivity that you brought in, that is the most important part. Everything else, people give presentations on general, on advocacy and everything, but they're not able to put that across. So I think that presentation in that
You know
sense
what?
was very good.
Vikram, I think in itself it was not very objective because it has a very subjective point of view. I mean, I came to these conclusions by myself throughout my experience. But what I think you're talking about is the pillars on which I'm building my definition of advocacy and activism. And those pillars are things that we cannot just, we can't arbitrary and in a very discretionary way say we have to take them off the equation when we talk about advocacy. For example, education, or policy work, or engagement, how we engage the community, what type of education we want, and what type of enlightenment we want to give people. So these things really are objective as they are. They cannot be changed. Otherwise, you'd be doing it wrong. In my opinion, you'd be doing it wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Lisa's doing a lot of work. Lisa's doing some interesting work. Lisa, please tell her what work you're doing.
Yeah, I'd love to know.
I'm in many, many different areas. So I do I do, of course, the diversity equity conversations that Vikram mentioned. I also work with restorative justice. Right now, we're trying to get an initiative to get actually to have more legal cases using circles or some of the other restorative justice techniques and involving the community a little bit more. I'm also I work with my local reentry council, working with people coming out of prison. And so I teach them a course in organizational culture. And we talk about actually the experience of being incarcerated as equal to an experience of going to a different country, and that it also creates PTSD, it creates other things. But what I want them to be aware is that some of the emotional experience they have is normal, so that to give them the sense that they can start sharing in a way, it really, because the conversation that I just had with a group of them relates to what Ken said. So I'd written it down, which I know you all said, that they are used to keeping inside and not sharing information. And so a lot of our meetings, they start to share more and they're like, oh, I'm so surprised I'm sharing these deeper thoughts. And I think if we had the same kind of conversation about how important it is to be able to share information and talk about it. And so
But Lisa, one second. I'll just put you on pause for 1 second. We just have to say good night to Nina because she has to leave.
Pause me forever. I don't know.
No, we have to just say good night to her. Bye, Nina. You go to sleep now.
No, Nina, I'm going to sleep.
Okay, bye.
Bye, Nina.
Night.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Vikram uncle, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am. Please.
Why is it two of you?
Look, this one is for backup. If for any reason everything fails, I'm still there.
He has 4 eyes on us now, not just 2.
My kitty says bye.
Bye, Lisa.
Bye to everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Good night. Have a good day,
night.
everybody.
Bye,
Take
bye,
care.
Nina.
Bye. Bye.
Good night.
Bye, Nina.
Bye.
Sleep well.
Everybody.
Bye.
I'll actually sleep a little later.
Hey, now off to bed. Bye.
When I come to India, I'm going to look you up.
She's gone now. Yes,
She's
now you're
gone.
serious. What you were saying, that part. I cut you off there.
I didn't know where it was. Oh, I was just talking about that course that I offer. And now I'm also working on art. I think I really want to document different ways of using art and as a tool for mediation, because I feel like art is a safe way. And again, I can go back to that quote that Ken said, how do you surface those things underneath that are keeping us from being able to see the reality? And sometimes using art as a safe way to do that, because somebody may draw that into a picture, or some of those internal messages can come out in art because it creates a safer space.
But how would that work? Just a little more.
Isn't it? 'Cause
How is it going to work, Lisa?
Weird things. What?
How is it going to work? Please tell us.
How is what going
How's
to work?
art going to work in mediation? Please tell us a little more. Just elaborate on that, because I'm a little distracted, because I have to do a little. I have to look at the chat also, and I have to just see what's happening around. So that's why I was a little distracted there. So I just a little more elaboration on that.
Yeah, no. Like you use it, you can use like theater art to do, like you could do a like a role play, but okay, imagine that this is the conflict. What are you going to say to resolve it? You could use this one-on-one with people in a scenario. That's using theater arts. And that way they can imagine how they're going to talk to somebody when they get into the imagination. It gives them a chance to practice it. You can use drawing. If you say so actually one of our participants in the MBBI, he created a project where she asked people to draw a picture. She works with people and trying to get them to open up to empathy. And so she has them draw a picture of the other person. And to do that, you have to ask questions about who they are. You have to find out who they are underneath. And she does this in Singapore to work with people who have a negative opinion about the lower class or the immigrants who are working there. So she has them draw someone from this population to open up empathy and to create a better understanding of each other. So that's another way to use it. There are like lots of different ways. So my idea is to start actually categorizing them and putting them in a format that other people can use them. It's not there yet, but so I'm just starting in that. So if it sounds sketchy, it's because I'm just starting.
No, good, interesting stuff. So Andrew, anything on the session for the next session? Anything specific that you think that? But that I think we need another.
No, I think it's.
So in between, we need
I wouldn't worry about the chronology too much. I would just say let him just say what he wants to say.
What I do.
I know you don't agree.
No, I'll tell you why. My whole concept was, let's get everything together, so that when that culmination happens, we know what all has gone into it, And at that point, then what explodes? Rather than, because what will happen is you get a little release here, then we forget about the fact that the civil rights movement, what kind of an effect did that have? Because it's a multiple.
But that's life. That's life. You know, it doesn't go to plan. And I think his telling his tale probably won't go to plan. I just let him. Ken has an awful lot to say, and we have an awful lot to learn.
No, but just tell me, Andrew, you want this on records because the recording is happening. You want me to stop the recording? I'll stop the recording, and then we talk about it. What do you want to do?
I don't mind. It's your recording.
No, I just felt that the discussion is because people are not part of it.
This isn't a Trump video that will end up on the.
No, my only thing was that people who can't be part of the meeting, at least they can at least watch it.
Cut you off and say good night.
Okay, Joya, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next time.
Absolutely.
Bye.
See you. Bye.
Bye. Joya, stay safe.
You too. You too.
I want to hear your story.
Yeah. But we have to identify the next mediator because we have now 6th of February, the next one with Ken. So in between, we need to, I was thinking with Tom, we can have Tom next time. We can talk to him.
Which Tom?
Tom was here, Valenti. He was with us.
No. He's a good speaker.
Yeah, I think we should ask him. Whatever else, I think we'll take some suggestions. Let me just also speak to a few people. Let's put this schedule in order. I mean, I just feel there's so many people that we need to talk to. So it doesn't have to be once a week. It can be more than that also.
There's someone who's got less work after Wednesday.
It's up till Wednesday?
After Wednesday, he has at 12 p.m. after Wednesday, he has less work than he had before.
What was Tom doing? That he
no,
has
I said there's not Tom. There's someone else in your country who will have less work to do after 12 p.m. on Wednesday.
I mean, he's already not doing work, so what's the point? There's no difference.
We can get him and Kim Jong-un to give us a joint session as to how they saved the world. How about that?
How they save the world, right.
What I'm going to do is, let me just stop the recording here, and then we